the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Vasudevaya. Hare. Reading today from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Canto 4, Chapter 27, Text 3. For those who may not be so familiar with Sanskrit, and maybe this is unnecessary, but I like sometimes to explain some of Sanskrit pronunciation, particularly for the benefit of those who are a little bit newer and not so familiar. I don't understand very much of Sanskrit at all, but the early days of Srila Prabhupada, there was a point at which he actually had a Sanskrit scholar travel around to our temples to instruct the devotees on how to pronounce things. And I didn't learn a lot, but a few things I picked up. So in this particular verse, we have two elements that maybe should be explained. There are two instances of Visarga, Visarga, and there's two instances of Anuswara. So Visarga generally is pronounced like the H in house. It is pronounced at the soft palate. In modern times, and as we generally pronounce Visarga in ISKCON, we just simply produce an echo of the previous vowel. So, for example, the second line of this text, and it should be explained that when we look at the Roman transliterations of a text, usually it's divided into two lines. Excuse me, not two lines, but four lines. Tend to recite them that way as though they were separate lines. But in fact, if you look at the Devanagari script, what is divided into two lines is actually one line of Sanskrit. So Visarga, as I explained, the prior vowel is echoed. That is only done at the end of a line of Sanskrit. If Visarga occurs elsewhere in the text, it is not echoed. So for our purposes, because we're mostly reading the Roman transliterations, the only time we would echo the Visarga is when it occurs at the end of the second line or the end of the fourth line, because those are actually the last words in the line of the Devanagari script. Anuswara, on the other hand, is always pronounced wherever it appears in the text. And it's used as kind of a shorthand for what is really supposed to be a nasal sound that resembles an N as in Nancy. So here in the Roman transliteration, the third line, there are two instances of an M with a dot over it. That's an Anuswara. So Anuswara is not pronounced like the letter M as in Mary. It's pronounced more like the letter N in Nancy, but with a nasal sound like the French word bon bon. So good luck with that. I have difficulty to pronounce these things, but I just thought I'd pass along that information. So I'll attempt to actually recite this. I found this particular text to be a little awkward. Ayo bagud Trier Apakrishta Chetanaha Akala Rangho Bubudhe Durat Yayang Deva Nisheti Pramada Parigraha Ayo bagud ha Antraer Apakrishta Chetanaha Akala Rangho Bubudhe Yayang Deva Nisheti Pramada Parigraha Ayo Bagudha Bariram Takandharo Raho Numantrar Apakrishta Chetanaha Akala Rangho Bubudhe Durapyayang Deva Nisheti Pramada Parigraha. Would anybody like to attempt that? Synonyms: Taya, by the queen. Upagudha was embraced. Parirabda, embraced. Kandharaha, shoulders. Rahaha, in a solitary place. Arumantrahi, by joking words. Apakrishta, Chetanaha, having degraded consciousness. Na, not. Kala Ramhaha, the passing of time. The Budhe was aware of. Duratyayam, impossible to overcome. Diva, day. Nisha, night. Iti, thus. Brahmada, by the woman. Parigraha, captivated. Translation. Queen Puranjani embraced the king, and the king also responded by embracing her shoulders. In this way, in a solitary place, they enjoyed joking words. Thus, King Puranjana became very much captivated by his beautiful wife and deviated from his good sense. He forgot that the passing of days and nights meant that his span of life was being reduced without profit. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The word Brahmada in this verse is very significant. A beautiful wife is certainly enlivening to her husband, but at the same time is the cause of degradation. The word Pramada means enlivening as well as maddening. Generally, a householder does not take the passing of days and nights very seriously. A person in ignorance takes it as the usual course that days come, and after the days, the nights come. This is the law of material nature. But a man in ignorance does not know that when the sun rises early in the morning, it begins to take away the balance of his life. Thus, day after day, the span of one's life is reduced. And forgetting the duty of human life, the foolish man simply remains in the company of his wife and enjoys her in a secluded place. Such a condition is called apakrishta chetana, or degraded consciousness. Human consciousness should be used for elevation to Krishna consciousness. But when a person is too much attracted to his wife and family affairs, he does not take Krishna consciousness very seriously. He thus becomes degraded, not knowing that he cannot buy back even a second of his life in return for millions of dollars. Greatest loss in life is passing time without understanding Krishna. Every moment of our lives should be utilized properly, and the proper use of life is to increase devotional service to the Lord. Without devotional service to the Lord, the activities of life become simply a waste of time. Shrama eva hi kevalam. Simply by becoming dutiful, we do not make any profit in life, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Dharma svanushtita pumsang vishvakshena katasuya nat parayed yadiratin shrama eva hi kevalam. If, after performing one's occupational duty very perfectly, one does not make progress in Krishna consciousness, it should be understood that he has simply wasted his time in valueless labor. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Gurta Parikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Jnanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shri Gurave Namaha. Translation again. Queen Puranjani embraced the king, and the king also responded by embracing her shoulders. In this way, in a solitary place, they enjoyed joking words. Thus, King Puranjana became very much captivated by his beautiful wife and deviated from his good sense. He forgot that the passing of days and nights meant that his span of life was being reduced without profit. So, express a few things that come to my mind as I look at this. Evidently, the queen was shorter than the king, because the verse says that he is embracing her shoulders. And this is, it might seem like an insignificant thing, but there are some things to understand about that. So, any conception man is supposed to be the head of his household, the uh, the helmsman, the captain of the ship. He's supposed to be pati guru to his wife. He's supposed to actually provide material and spiritual guidance for his family. Uh, and to be effective in that position requires that he have the respect and cooperation of his family members. So, Vedic idea is that to help that process along, and marriages are arranged, and traditionally marriages were arranged based upon the compatibility of two individuals, based upon their uh, their psychology, which was ascertained by looking at their astrological charts, but also uh, physiologically. There was an effort to try to combine individuals in a compatible way. Um, Broadly, marriages were arranged between specific varnas, usually within the same varna. Certain a kshatriya or a vaishya might a kshatriya might marry a vaishya woman, for example, or most usually a kshatriya woman. There are certain combinations that are considered compatible and others that are considered to be incompatible. But then also physiologically, the stature of the two parties is taken into consideration. So the husband is supposed to be taller than the wife. Ideally, he is also older, a little older than the wife. I have actually read injunctions in which marrying an older woman older than the husband is ill advised. And there's all kinds of reasoning behind these things, but we're not going to go there. So the idea is that the husband should dominate, even physically, as he should be more educated, he should be more knowledgeable, but he should also be taller, he should be older. All of these help the wife to remain respectful of the husband, and then it's easier for her to cooperate, because it's not necessarily an easy thing. And we see practically now that many householders have difficulties, oftentimes because the women find it difficult to be submissive to a husband who they perceive to be inferior to them in various regards. And it's not just their perception, but quite often that's actually the case. Unfortunately, in the present context, our men tend to be particularly qualified as husbands. The Vedic ideal, of course, is that the first 20 years of a man's life is spent in Gurukula, training intensively under the spiritual master. In the Gurukula, he learns everything, not just the transcendental philosophy, the Shastra. He learns material sciences. He learns occupational skills. He learns how to conduct himself in the household ashram. In short, he learns everything that he needs to know the duration of his life, and everything necessary to ensure the ultimate success of his life, that he will successfully cultivate his Krishna consciousness. So such an individual is very highly qualified. He will know the Shastra conclusions forward and backwards, because in the Gurukula, as a student, he is practicing brahmacharya. There are 8 aspects to brahmacharya that are worth knowing. They are described in several places in Srila Prabhupada's books. And I won't go into the details of that now, but Srila Prabhupada generally just summed up the matter by stating that one should not engage in illicit sex, but even to think of a woman, to look at a woman, to speak about a woman, for a brahmachari, these are all fall downs. These are some of the 8 aspects of brahmacharya. Why is brahmacharya practiced? Brahmacharya is important for a student because by practice of brahmacharya, the student becomes a very excellent student. Physiologically, there are changes that take place in the body of a brahmachari, or anyone for that matter who practices brahmacharya. And the ideal in spiritual life is that everyone practices brahmacharya. Brahmacharya, the principle of brahmacharya, is not exclusive to the brahmacharis. Of course, it's also practiced by the sannyasis and also the vanaprasthas, but even the householders are supposed to be householder brahmacharis. That is the meaning of the term grahastha. The household ashram is an ashram. It is supposed to be a situation for the cultivation of spiritual life. So there are rules and regulations which include regulating sex life. So in other ashrams, the sex life is regulated to the point of complete elimination. In the household ashram, there is a license for limited, regulated sex life, and it's quite a narrow scope. It's sex life for the purpose of procreation only, under some stringent conditions. But to get back to the practice of brahmacharya, the benefit of brahmacharya is that by seminal retention, the student develops a very powerful ability to concentrate. The power of concentration becomes very intense. His determination becomes very powerful. So he can apply himself to his studies with great focus and with great determination. And additionally, he develops a tremendous power of recollection. His memory becomes very powerful. Practically, a strict brahmachari will have photographic memory. He will be able to remember the most minute details about anything, having just a little contact with it. So a guru could speak on a particular subject matter, and by once simply hearing, a brahmachari would be able to remember everything. And that memory would stick for the balance of his days. Those are some of the benefits of brahmacharya, and there are more. Another benefit is that by retaining the semen, physiologically, the body becomes vibrantly healthy, able to ward off all kinds of diseases very easily. Tremendous resistance to disease and vibrant health. Yogis who practice, very powerful yogis, which you don't typically find in this age. But historically, we have historical accounts of powerful yogis who, by practice of uh, very strict brahmacharya and other austerities. They actually had the power to regenerate even bodily limbs. So a yogi might meditate for uh, hundreds or thousands of years, and his body might be eaten by ants, as was the case for Hiranyakashipu, but they can regenerate all of what has been destroyed. Brahmacharya can be extremely powerful, and merely by practicing brahmacharya without any other spiritual practice, brahmacharya alone is sufficient to elevate one to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the material world. It's not our interest, it's not our goal, and our interest as Vaishnavas in brahmacharya is only that it helps to prosecute Krishna consciousness. It sets up an ideal condition in the consciousness for the cultivation of Krishna consciousness, and simultaneously it helps to slacken the attachment to sense gratification, the chief of which is sex life, because we are conditioned by lifetimes of sexual indulgence. So we have a conditioned tendency and affinity, a conditioned attraction to the opposite sex for of sense enjoyment by the practice of brahmacharya, that not of attachment is slackened. So it's beneficial in a great many ways. A brahmachari is someone who is from the age of 5 to the age of 25. He has undergone a very intensive program of study. He has learned all the Shastra inside and out. He has been strictly practicing brahmacharya. He has learned spiritual science and he's learned material science. And then he enters the household ashram, perhaps if he chooses to do so. And when he does, he's then very highly qualified to act in that capacity. In the capacity of Pati Guru, the husband guru. And for the wife, it's very easy to accept such a husband as an authority and to cooperate with him, to remain submissive. It's an easy thing to do. She perceives him easily as being an authority. So presently, we don't have the benefit of that kind of background. We're trying to make devotees from individuals who were born into a degraded situation, degraded throughout most of their life. At some point, they take to Krishna consciousness, and then we try to get them as well prepared as possible, but it's a difficult thing. So sometimes men then will enter the household ashram. They have ideas that their wife is just automatically going to be submissive to them, and they're anxious to take the reins, despite in many cases little qualification. And then they try to demand the respect of their wife, and it doesn't go well. The adage is that one should command respect rather than demand respect. And so if a person has actually cultivated their consciousness, their character, that is seen by their behavior, by their achar. You may speak very nicely, but to also walk the walk rather than just talking, is especially potent. And so when a person is genuine in their character, they automatically command respect. Trying to demand respect never works well. People will not appreciate that. Getting back to the verse, so husband and wife here are embracing one another. First thought that came to my mind is a statement that I heard from Srila Prabhupada many years ago, in which he was explaining some things about the relationship between men and women. Speaking of householders in particular, he said, if a man and a woman embrace one another, how in the world would it be possible for them to not fall down to sex life? Anyway, I'm not going to go into detail about that. You can think about it, but it's something that Srila Prabhupada said. Sometimes our householders have difficulty to adhere to the standard. Sex life only for the purpose of procreation and only once in a month for that purpose. Sometimes they fall down. So here, Srila Prabhupada was suggesting that, if you engage in that kind of behavior, embracing, I'd find it difficult, very difficult to control your senses. But I'm certainly not going to try to dictate to any householder how they should conduct their affairs. These are individual matters, and people have to work out for themselves what works for them and what does not work for them. But just so you know, Srila Prabhupada said that. As far as King Paranjani goes, he was already fallen. He's a Grihamedi. He comes home from hunting, and his first thought is that he wants to enjoy sex life, and he does. He's not planning to procreate. He just wants to enjoy his senses. So that's the definition of a Grihamedi. Also, from this verse, we see that they came together in a solitary place. So there's a few things to understand about solitary places. First of all, in civilized human society, men and women do not interact intimately unless they are in a solitary place. They don't engage in any sort of intimate act, embracing, kissing, whatever it may be. They don't do that publicly. In modern society, of course, these kinds of things go on everywhere all the time, which is a source of degradation, not only for the individuals involved, but for the rest of society as well. The story of a Jamil, we see that a Jamil fell down from his high Brahminical status simply by seeing a pair of Shudras embracing, just by seeing. So the power of seeing is alone is competent to ruin someone spiritually. So that we could speak on that subject matter for days on end. So solitary place. Other things to understand about solitary places. A man, whomever he may be, whether he is married or not, is bidden to remain in a solitary place with any woman other than his wife, because the senses are very, very powerful, and things can happen. So even even one's mother, one's sister, one's daughter. A man is never supposed to be alone with even his mother or sister or his own daughter, uh, only with one's wife. And this may sound bizarre to some people, but the fact is that nature works in that way. People are the senses are very powerful. Maya is very strong, and the fact is that things do happen. Sometimes people want to deny that this is truly a fact, but Lord Chaitanya himself stated that even he is disturbed by merely the sight of a wooden doll in the shape of a woman. He said that the only person who is not so affected is Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy, of course, was he's understood to be actually Arjuna, and he is also understood to be Srimati Lalita Saki. Srila Prabhupada explains that he is completely unaffected, and in Chaitanya Leela, he was working with young girls, directing them for transcendental plays. He would bathe them and dress them, touching their bodies, and remain completely undisturbed. Srila Prabhupada explains that is possible for him because he doesn't live in the material world. He's actually situated in the spiritual world. So it's possible to remain undisturbed if you're so situated in the spiritual world. But if you are to any extent conditioned by the material nature, identifying with your material body at all, it is not possible to be undisturbed. For a man, he cannot remain undisturbed in the presence of a woman. It's just a fact of material life. Sometimes men are maybe a little fanatical about trying to protect themselves when they're around women, and sometimes the women object to their fanatical behavior, and they will suggest, "Oh, Prabhu, you should just grow up." But there's no question of growing up. It's not a matter of maturation. It's the only thing that will make it possible to remain undisturbed in the presence of a woman is that you have to be extraordinarily advanced to the extent that you are completely beyond material identification, actually situated in your original spiritual identity. Then you can remain unaffected. I prepared some notes for this class, and it got to be ridiculous. I have over 30 pages of notes, and I didn't have time to organize them into a reasonable sequence, so trying to work from those notes is practically impossible. I'm going to try to proceed through this. We're running short of never enough time, so much to cover. I'm sure I could speak on this one report for a few days easily. Let's see, I'll just I'm going to read a text in the purport that actually occurs later in the fourth canto, because it helps to illuminate this particular verse. Translation reads as follows: "My dear king, woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end very disturbing, is exactly like a flower which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires, and he enjoys sex just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys life of sense gratification, from his tongue to his genitals, and in this way, the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. A lot of wonderful information in the purport, but we're very short of time. Great many things I wanted to cover here. It's very frustrating. The unfortunate, and I'm hoping that time because I want to try to create some sense of balance here because it's on one hand you can read Srimad Bhagavatam and get a very negative impression of household life and the association of women, but that's not the whole picture. There is another side, and it's important to have a balanced understanding of these things. So I was going to try to support some of the assertions made in this text and purport, but time is running out. So I do want to. I could go on for a half hour on the topic of pramada, or madness. All right, we have to address it a little bit. The fact that in the household ashram there is a tendency, whether the house, Griya Medi ashram, which is not an ashram, household life, whether it is grahastha life or household life, the tendency is there to become illusioned by the environment, the circumstances. There is abundant opportunity for sense gratification. The senses are subject to all kinds of allurements. One has to be very, very sober. You have to strictly adhere to the practice of Krishna consciousness to protect yourself from fall down or to become greatly entangled in the illusion. Household life can reinforce the bodily conception of life. It can work in two ways. If it's done properly according to religious principles, it can help to liberate you from material bondage, but done without proper attention to the injunctions of Shastra and the instructions of the spiritual master, it can become extremely entangling. Even those who take great care to try to do things nicely and protect themselves, unavoidably there are all kinds of implications. And the tendency comes easily to gradually forget about Krishna consciousness and just get more and more entangled in the business of just trying to survive as a householder. Man has all kinds of responsibilities. He's got to maintain his family members, he's got to feed them, provide shelter, clothing, education, healthcare. He needs to secure an income. So much of his time and energy is dedicated to those activities. He finds that he doesn't have time for hearing and chanting. He has no time for reading. He can't finish his rounds. The wife has children, and so much of her time is consumed trying to care for the children. It is very common that when women have children, they find it extremely difficult to finish their rounds. So we go on for hours talking about the many ways that people become entangled in how their sadhana is negatively impacted. But there's another side to this. It's very unfortunate because I tell you, there are some really valuable things to understand about this. And I don't know, maybe we'll get a chance to discuss these topics. I can bring up some of these points. But there are good practical reasons for entering the household ashram. And there really isn't time to address that. Primarily, though, I will say that if one is at risk of complete fall down, he poses a risk to himself and to society. And for such an individual, a safer situation is to get married. It's a safer situation, both for him and for society. It will be unfortunate for potentially for him and his wife if he can't uplift himself, but at least he can buy himself some time, and by the practice of Krishna consciousness, he can try to gain some strength. The problem with this approach is that for many individuals, it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. Household life is not a solution to a problem of agitated senses, not by a long shot. It can make the matter worse, but it protects you from more serious sinful activity. It can save you from going to hell. So it may be the practical way to go, even from a material perspective. From a spiritual perspective, you bring two devotees together, and together they can be a very strong force for Krishna consciousness. Everything is made possible by the blessings of Guru and Krishna. We have the benefit of chanting the holy names, is our greatest benefit and our salvation. There is, of course, in Kali Yuga no other way than the chanting of the holy names, and that can be done anywhere under any circumstances. Doesn't matter what varna or ashram. Everyone can chant Hare Krishna and elevate themselves to the highest standard of Krishna consciousness. We're really out of time, but I wanted to say, actually, I wanted to read something because one might get a very negative impression of women from some statements, and there are countless, dozens and dozens of statements. Srila Prabhupada quotes Chanakya Pandit, and there are so many statements from Shastra that talk about the danger of women. And I think that sometimes these statements may be misunderstood. So it's important to understand that those women who come to Krishna consciousness are not ordinary women. When we speak about some of the qualities of women that are dangerous, that may apply to anyone with a female form. For a man, that can be problematic. But as far as the character of women, sometimes some negative things are said about the character of women, but this really refers to non-devotees, to materialistically minded women. Those who come to Krishna consciousness are very, very unique. Given the consciousness of it is extraordinary that a woman comes to Krishna consciousness from one perspective. And those who do come to Krishna consciousness are not ordinary women. Srila Prabhupada talks about this in many places. On one morning walk in 1974, Srila Prabhupada stated that, he was talking about his female disciples, he said that they are preachers, they are Vaishnavas. By their association, one becomes a Vaishnava. Jamuna told a story I'll read this real quickly. She says, on January 18th, Srila Prabhupada again engaged in a teasing pastime with me on the drive to his morning walk. Srila Prabhupada sat in the car with Mr. Mahadevya, two other invited Indian gentlemen, and Tamal Krishna Goswami. We were all crowded into one of those small ambassador cars, and I was the only woman. So it was like Srila Prabhupada was speaking to just men, as though no women were present. So the story of Lord Chaitanya's stopping kirtan at the home of Srivas Thakur, because he sensed a woman present, was brought up. By now, I was used to these exchanges, understanding on the one hand that there is some difference, yet having personal experience that Srila Prabhupada overlooked this and accepted the devotional service of any aspiring servitor, always seeing to the welfare of the soul, regardless of the body he or she inhabited. So Srila Prabhupada and the men were speaking and joking in Hindi in this crowded car, with me crowded in there with them. Then, just as they were getting out of the car, he spoke about the terrible politics in India and again quoted Chanakya Pandit, a shloka that a politician or a woman cannot be trusted. Everyone was laughing in a very jovial way. And then all of a sudden, the Srila Prabhupada turned around, looked at me and said, "What do you think, Jamuna?" Of course, I totally agree, I replied. A woman's nature is discussed in so many places in the Srimad Bhagavatam. She has many things that she must try to consciously conquer in this lifetime to go back to Godhead. It is the truth. I was also laughing. But then Srila Prabhupada again became a little serious and said, "But you are not a woman. You are 100% a devotee." And then the laughing stopped. Srila Prabhupada and I had a close relationship over the years, and I was present several times when he teased me in this way. He would always look over at me to check my reaction to his statements, and this was another such time. They are devotees. They are not ordinary women. By associating with them, you will become a Vaishnava. Are there any statements, comments, questions, anything at all? Wow, crickets.
It usually takes people a little bit to get their thoughts together.
All right, nobody's got anything. Well, as we are not yet greeting the deities and we have dead air to fill, let's see, I could read something. Version of my PC. This verse brings to mind a number of songs from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of which is Arunodaya Kirtan, the first one. Srila Bhaktivinoda sings Mukunda Madhava Yadava Bolina Boloreva Dana Bori Piche Nidava Shekelo Rerati Divasa Sharira Saje. Lord Chaitanya called out to the townsfolk, "You spend your nights uselessly sleeping and your days decorating your bodies. Now just fill your mouths with the vibration of the holy names, Mukunda, Madhava, Yadava, and Hori, chanting without offense. Emana Durlava Madhava Deho Paiki Koro Bhava Nakeo Ebina Bajile Yashoda Sutta Karame Poribe Laje." You have achieved the rare human body. Don't you care for this gift? If you do not serve the darling of Yashoda now, great sorrow awaits you at death. Each time the sun rises and sets, a day passes and is lost. Then why do you remain idle and refuse to serve the Lord of the hearts? Jivana anitya jana hasa tahena vidha vibhara bar namashraya kori jatane tumi takaha abanaka je. Understand this essential fact. Life is temporary, and full of all kinds of miseries. So take shelter of the holy name as your only business. Hare Krishna. I think that's a good note to end on. I apologize for the disjointed and rambling nature of this qualification of me doing these things. Just trying to purify myself, but I'm doing so at everyone else's expense. I apologize. Get our comments. Guess as long as we can still do something. This verse and purport also remind me of shloka from Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, text 44. Yogaishvarya prasaktanam tayapa hritachetasam Pravyasayapika buddhi samadhau navidhiyate, means in the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. This is the danger of household life, that one can easily be distracted and lose the resolute determination that is necessary for advancement in Krishna consciousness. It happens. It happens a lot. Because, all right, here we go. Hare Krishna, Prabhus. Thank you for your time. Hare Krishna.